All right, let's cut to the chase. So what exactly is this $163 billion budget cut proposal all about? The proposal, which was released just a week ago by the White House, outlines significant spending reductions across multiple federal agencies and programs. It's part of the administration's fiscal year 2026 discretionary budget request and represents one of the most substantial proposed spending reductions in recent memory. So let's break it down in plain English. And I'll put the link to the budget proposal in the description below. To begin with, let me emphasize that this is a proposal and Congress still has to approve this budget. Now, here's what you need to know. This budget request outlines what President Trump is proposing to spend and not spend starting October 1st, 2025. Remember, the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st and then ends on September 30th in the following year. So think of government spending like two giant buckets. One is mandatory spending, things like Social Security and Medicare, basically the big ticket stuff Uncle Sam has to pay, like your grandparents' Social Security retirement checks. The other bucket is discretionary spending, which is everything else. Think defense, education, housing programs, health research, and many more. So first up, the non-defense discretionary spending. This is where the real trimming happens because Trump's proposed budget would slash non-defense discretionary spending by 22% compared to the 2025 baseline. Now, let me break down the specifics a bit more from this 46-page document. So the first one is a pay increase for all military members, and it states that it recognizes America's service members' sacrifice to the nation with a 3.8% pay raise, which will start on January 1st, 2026. And keep in mind that during the Biden administration, he would propose something like 2%, 3%, or 4%. But sometimes Congress would either cut or reduce 70% of that request or sometimes increase that. So I'll say this again. This is just a proposal from the Trump administration. And there's no pay raise for federal employees in January. And this salary freeze is going to be a pay cut for some federal employees, probably about half of them, who were hired before 2013 because they're going to have to increase their first contributions starting in January 2026 if that budget reconciliation bill passes, and then followed by another one in January 2027. So the congressional bill proposes to have federal employees who are paying 0.8% to have their first pension increase to 2.6% starting in January 2026, and then another 1.8% increase from 2.6 to 4.4% in January 2027. And for those who are currently paying 3.1%, they will see an increase in first pension contribution to 4.4% starting in January 2027. So if there's another salary freeze in 2027, then you could see a potential net pay cut, especially for those who were hired before 2013. And the next one is education. So in education on page 6 of this document, we're looking at significant reductions in funding for Title I grants to low-income schools and federal student aid programs like Pell Grants. The Department of Education would see approximately $12 billion in cuts, which is about 15% of its budget, and eliminate many K-12 and higher education programs. And some of the other things that you will see in cuts will be TRIO programs and gaining early awareness and readiness for undergraduate programs. I guess the acronym for that is GEAR Up. And the next one is federal work study, cutting about $980 million. Supplemental educational opportunity grants for $910 million. English language acquisition is going to be cut for $890 million. Adult education, migrant education, and special programs for migrant students are all going to be cut. Ed program administration. So let me see. So yeah, a bunch of them are going to be cut. So education department is seeing a bunch of cuts, including training and advisory services, equity assistance centers, childcare access means, parents in school, Howard University, Office for Civil Rights. So all of those are going to be part of the cuts that got proposed by the Trump administration. And the next one on the chopping block is the environmental protection agencies. And that budget takes a sharp dip of around $4.5 billion, which affects clean air programs, water infrastructure, and climate research. The budget did provide a $9 million increase from the 2025 budget to drinking water programs and another $27 million increase for the Indian Reservation Drinking Water Program. And the biggest cut that you're going to see is the Clean and Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Funds. So that's about $2.46 billion. And you can read that on the right side. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but as you can see what programs are going to be cut, as well as categorical grants, hazardous substance superfund, Office of Research and Development is going to lose about 235 million. Environmental Justice, Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, and as well as Atmospheric Protection Program. Another one on the list is the Department of Health and Human Services, which faces one of the largest cuts at $24.1 billion, affecting everything from medical research funding to preventive health programs. But Make America Healthy Again, or it's called MAHA, I guess, will receive $500 million in funding for the initiative, which would allow the secretary to tackle nutrition, physical activity, healthier lifestyles, over reliance on medication and treatments, the effects of new technological habits, environmental impacts, and food and drug quality and safety across HHS. The Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LEHEAP, I guess, will get a $4 billion cut in funding. Refugee and Unaccompanied Alien Children Programs, or UAC, will get a $2 billion cut in funding, which states that it was for illegal immigrants. And please keep in mind that this channel is completely neutral. I'm not taking any sides, so that I just want you to get the most unbiased information from my channel as possible. And Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Programs, or the CDC, will see a funding cut of $3.6 billion. The National Institute of Health, or NIH, will see a big cut of funding of $18 billion. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, will be eliminated entirely, saving the budget $1 billion. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, program management will get cut by $674 million. And that is, again, the proposal. While the Department of Homeland Security receives $43.8 billion in funding increase, they're looking to cut funding for FEMA grant programs by $646 million. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency will lose another $491 million. Shelter and Services Program will lose by $650 million. And Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, by $247 million. For the Department of Justice, it looks like it's gonna cut funding by $1.02 billion to reduce unnecessary state and local grant programs. And they're going to reform and streamline the FBI by cutting the program, or the FBI, by $545 million, DEA by $212 million, and then refocus ATF enforcement and regulatory priorities by $468 million, and general legal activities by $193 million. And under the Department of Defense, it looks like they're proposing to increase the mandatory funding of $113 billion. And they want to eliminate woke climate and DEI programs and redirects resources to support the warfighter. And they want to make a down payment on the development and deployment of a Golden Dome for America, a next generation missile defense, kind of like what Israel has, and expands U.S. shipbuilding capacity by investing in America's shipyards and industrial base, increasing wages and modernizing infrastructure, and support U.S. space dominance, and fund the F-47, which is the next fighter jet air dominance platform. And this is the sixth generation fighter aircraft, and protect America's homeland from threats at the border and the ongoing invasion of the U.S. And recognizes, again, I talked about this, but increasing the pay for service members for 3.8%. And the Department of Energy is going to lose about $15.247 billion, and mostly from energy efficiency and renewable energy. Office of Science is going to lose about $1.145 or $148 billion, and environmental management by $389 million. Advanced Research Project Agency Energy will be $260 million. Nuclear energy by $408 million, and then Office of Fossil Energy by $270 million. And going into the Department of Transportation, this one is getting an increase of $359 million. And this is to improve the FAA facility and radar upgrades. And if you're not tracking what's going on in Newark, in New Jersey, they're having a bunch of cancellation on the flights because they're having a serious malfunction with their radar systems or something like that, where the air traffic controllers can't even see the plane, so they had to ground everything. But this is to increase the funding of $824 million. This is to invest in the U.S. National Airspace System, or NAS. In addition to a previously provided $1 billion advance appropriation, the budget requests an additional $4 billion for NAS upgrades, including a $450 million down payment on a multi-year, multi-billion dollar radar replacement program. Okay. And the next one is increasing the funding for Infrastructure for Rebuilding America program, or INFRA. The budget provides $770 million on top of the $1.5 billion provided by INFRA for the INFRA grants program, which uses rigorous benefit cost analysis to assist nationally significant highway, port, and freight rail projects on a competitive basis. And the next one is the Rail Safety and Infrastructure Grants by $400 million. That's an increase. And the Shipbuilding and Port Infrastructure by $596 million, which is also an increase. This one is interesting. NOAA, these are the weather guys. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration will lose about a total of $1.5 billion in funding in the next fiscal year. Housing and urban development would also see reductions of approximately $6.8 billion, which will impact rental assistance and community development block grants. The Department of Labor is going to see a funding cut of $1.64 billion. The Department of the Interior is going to see a funding cut of $609 million. And there are some interesting ones, like the Department of Agriculture. They're going to get an increase of $15 million for the Food Safety Inspection Service. Rental assistance grants for $74 million. But they are looking to cut National Institute of Food and Agriculture for $602 million. And this is an interesting one. There's also the Department of Treasury that faces cuts that would reduce significant funding for the IRS. But if there's one that would get the deepest cut, it's the State Department and international programs, with foreign aid and diplomatic operations facing reductions of nearly 30% in some areas. You can also read through this, but NASA is also going to lose some funding, but except for the human space exploration. So they're looking to fund $647 million for the human space exploration by allocating over $7 billion for lunar exploration and introducing $1 billion in new investments for Mars-focused programs. The budget ensures that America's human space exploration efforts remain unparalleled, innovative, and efficient. Okay. And for the cuts, they're looking to cut, it's interesting, they're looking to cut NASA by quite a lot. So space science, $2.2 billion, mission support by $1.1 billion, earth science by $1.1 billion, legacy human exploration systems, $879 million, space tech, $531 million, International Space Station, they're going to get a cut too by $508 million, aeronautics, $346 million, and then Office of STEM, basically $143 million. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, maybe the cuts are worth it if they're reducing waste and getting the deficit under control. And that's a fair point, because fiscal discipline is important. And I mean, if it's fraud, waste, and abuse, then I'm all for it. But keep in mind that despite the $163 billion in cuts, the deficit is still projected to grow. And now let's talk taxes for a second, because this ties in with the overall strategy. Trump's budget proposal assumes that the 2017 tax cuts remain in place and are made permanently. Now, again, I'm being completely neutral here, and some people believe lower taxes encourage businesses to grow and lead to more job creation. Others argue that it benefits the rich more than the middle class. That debate could go on forever, right? But the bottom line is this. If you're cutting taxes and cutting spending on public programs without either reducing mandatory spending or increasing the tax revenue, you're still left with a deficit problem. And I always tell my clients that you should only spend less than what you bring in. It's a simple math problem, right? Which brings us to the Congressional Budget Office's assessment. The CBO estimates that the federal deficit would still hit $1.6 trillion in 2026. And that's still pretty significant. So what's the goal here? From what I can see, the Trump administration is pushing for a long-term vision by having leaner government, lower taxes, stronger military. And the argument goes, if the private sector has more money, it will grow the economy and raise wages. But the flip side from the opponents, of the proposal is that cutting programs that millions of Americans rely on, especially in education, housing, and public health, can have ripple effects that hit vulnerable communities the hardest. And let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. And the way they describe it is that it's kind of like saying we're remodeling the house, but we're only updating the front porch by taking the roof off the living room. Looks great from the outside, but inside, some people are going to get rained on. Now, let's zoom out a little bit. This budget is a proposal. That's it, a suggestion, right? Congress still has to review it, modify it, and argue over it before we get a final budget. So don't go panicking just yet. I do want you to stay tuned when the House starts to vote on the budget reconciliation bill, maybe by the end of May or the beginning of June. We'll see what happens because many Republicans still disagree with the bill, and that's why the Ways and Means Committee keeps delaying the markup and the committee meeting. But anyway, I would like to know what your thoughts are on the budget proposal in the comment section down below. In the meantime, feel free to schedule a 60-minute consultation with me by visiting firestation.com/consultation and get your free resources by visiting firestation.com/resources. And this has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.